So as we listen to the sound of the bell, we can touch the seed of gratitude in our heart. Right now I feel so much gratitude to Thai, our teacher, for offering us this great teaching of interbeing, for giving us a path, for translating the Buddha's teaching into modern times, language, and for making it possible to be happy in this difficult world. So dear respected Thai, dear noble community, so we are continuing with the class of collective awakening, Thich Nhat Hanh's vision for mindfulness in public health, and looking into this week the book Interbeing. Actually, this is the older copy. There's an updated version from 2020. And a lot of updated material in the new version. So I've looked at both versions, but I have the physical copy of the old one. And this book is a description as well as a charter of the order of interbeing and commentaries on the 14 mindfulness trainings. So if we consider ourselves to be a member of the order of interbeing, we should have this book. And certainly if we are a core member, a member of the core community, it means we've been ordained into the order of interbeing, then we should have a copy of this book. It's a kind of manifesto for interbeing in the world and how we can work together to reduce suffering as a community. There's so many things here, I'm not sure where to start. So as we already learned, Thai started the order of interbeing after he returned to Vietnam, after being in Princeton and Columbia. So we learned Thai created, along with Sister Shang Kong, the School of Youth for Social Service. Thai founded the university, Hanh University, for Buddhist monastics, to learn an updated curriculum. And Thai also saw that there was a need to create a core community of committed practitioners who would not only undertake precepts, but actually undertake training. It has happened in the Buddhist community that we receive certain precepts and we follow the prohibitions that they entail, and we lose sight of the training that is in there, the mind training. And so Thai's inspiration to create the 14 mindfulness trainings of the Order of Interbeing was to bring that mind training into the precepts and call them trainings, mindfulness trainings. So it's not enough just to be a social worker. You need to have a practice, a way to transform your mind. And that's the insight Thich had when he went back to Vietnam and he began receiving volunteers into the SYSS. He saw if there's no mindfulness training, then quickly the community will become caught up in its work and lose sight of the most important part, which is each volunteer's transformation. How can we help others if we can't take care of ourselves? I know that if I don't enjoy my steps when I walk down here to the meditation hall, then how can I consider giving a Dhamma talk? The steps that I take coming down here are as important as what I might say. So if I'm rushing or just thinking about what I'm going to say during the Dhamma talk, then I'm missing the whole point, which is to be aware of the present moment. And that doesn't mean that I'm not sometimes lost in my thinking when I enjoy my steps coming down here, but I know to come back to my body, come back to my breathing, that what is transmitted here is only partially from the words, but it's from my practice, it's from your practice. When I come into the hall and I feel this energy of calm that we all feel, I know that that is actually one of the most important conditions. It's not what I say or do necessarily, but it's this energy that we create together of practice. And the same is true for those who are at home watching on YouTube or Facebook or whatever this video is going out on. That when you sit there at your desk or on your bed and you do it with mindfulness, that you are actually contributing to the energy of peace in the world and the energy of peace that's generated in this talk. So all of this insight Thich had when he saw the School of Youth for Social Service flowering and taking form, he needed to build in a core community of practitioners who would make sure that they were taking care of their own body and mind, and then helping to guide the larger community also to take care of their body and mind. And so Thich proposed the Tipian order. Tipian. So tip has many meanings. One is to receive. Thich says, we receive goodness, beauty, insight, and a sense of morality from our ancestors. From our spiritual ancestors, we receive the wonderful Dharma, the teachings that lead to insight and awakening. Thich often said, Thich doesn't have to do very much. The ancestors have already prepared everything. And that phrase reminds me that usually I just have to get out of the way of myself and allow the Dhamma to manifest. Usually it is my sense of self which is creating the problem. If I am able to receive the spiritual transmission from our ancestors, it means I remove my preferences, my likes, dislikes, my wanting to do this, not wanting to do that, then everything flows very easily. And compassion is there, understanding is there. But if I continue to block, to hold on too tightly to my idea, then I cannot receive the transmission. So deep, first of all, means to receive. And the second meaning is to continue. Tiếp tục. Tiếp. Như vậy hả? Tiếp tục. It's like continue. Yeah. It means extending and perpetuating the career of enlightenment that began with the Buddha and has been continuing ever since. We continue the Buddha, the ancestral teachers, our own teacher of this lifetime, and our blood ancestors. Someone who has filial piety is someone who continues to fulfill the deep aspirations of their ancestors. I know that in the West, at least when I was growing up, filial piety was not a word that somehow got me out of bed in the morning or got me excited to go to a party with my friends. Or But over time, I've come to see how precious it is, and also how we may have lost some beautiful aspects of our own traditions in the West. Those of us with European ancestors may have lost that sense of reverence for our parents. Mm-hmm. So deep also means we continue our parents. We continue our teachers as well. We know that in America often our teachers are paid very little. In Vietnam, after Tết, after you visit, you pay reverence to your parents. The next is you pay reverence to your teachers. You go and visit them, offer them a gift. You go and bow to them. And I often think back to how sometimes callously we treated our teachers in middle school, high school, especially 8th grade for some reason, I remember. Some things that, I cannot. And here are these wonderful human beings who they're not there for the money. They deeply want to transmit their wisdom, their understanding to us, and we throw pieces of paper at them or make comments. It's kind of shocking, but this is the United States of America. So this sense of continuing our teachers through our kind bodily actions, our kind speech, kind thoughts, wishing well for our teachers is very precious. And I think it's something we can cultivate. It's something that I discovered in the Buddhist tradition here in the West. I didn't know was there. I felt, as a young person, quite in my early 20s, quite lost and depressed. But when I found Dhamma communities, I saw places where people still had respect for teachers, where they had an open heart to learn, even as adults, even as older people. There's a sense of reverence for the Dhamma and reverence for teachers. And that's, of course there can always be situations when that can be abused, but if we're not careful, we throw the baby out with the bathwater and we lose entirely our sense of gratitude and love for our teachers. I recently went back to visit one of my teachers when the Sangha, some of us were asked to go to Boston to an event recently in this summer, and so I took the opportunity to visit my cross-country coach from high school, and he was one of my first spiritual teachers, Richard Peish. And so lovely. He came right out when I got out of the car to the driveway and just gave me a big hug. He used to have us visualize the race before we would run it. And always, he didn't talk about competing, but talked about teamwork, running as a team, and seeing how we can support one another as runners on the team. And I was very fortunate to have go on a wake-up tour in 2011, and we invited him and his wife for dinner. And so the brothers and sisters could play music for him and make dinner, and he was so touched. And then recently, just 2 months ago, I went back to see him. When we would go on cross-country meets, Mrs. Peish, his wife, would write a poem for us to inspire us. And even though he didn't talk about competition, the cross-country team was 6 years undefeated. But we didn't think about competition. A good spiritual teacher brings out the best in their students. And that's what I feel he did in us. We didn't know we had that capacity, yet he was able to make that capacity manifest. And sorry, I'm remembering this, that the very last meet of my senior year, we lost. And I always remember how he did not get upset. He just came down the day after we lost the meet, and here, it's my senior year, and we were feeling like we failed. And he just smiled and he said, "Well, not quite sure what to do today." And or he said something like, "I've never been in that situation, or I haven't been in that situation before." But there was so much love, and you could see that he was not less happy because we had a team, we had a sense of being together, and we had done our best. Yeah. So we can remember a teacher in our life, and that warmth that we feel when we think about what they transmitted to us. And that is filial piety. So we don't have to be scared by the word. Just thinking with gratitude towards a teacher like that already makes us feel warm inside. So that is also Thich. Deep is to continue. Continue our ancestors, our parents, our teachers. And the third meaning is to be in touch. Deep suk. Đúng rồi, huh? Deep suk. Yeah. I'm getting encouragement from the back. Deep suk means to be in touch. Thich says, to begin with, we are in touch with the wonderful present moment, the miracle of life that is present in us and around us. If we want to be in touch, we have to come out of our shell and look clearly and deeply at the wonders of life. The snowflakes, the moonlight, the beautiful flowers. But we also need to recognize that suffering exists. Fear, anxiety, hunger, disease, and oppression. If we are not in touch with all this, we are not truly alive. When we are in touch with life, we are nourished, we transform and grow. So to be in touch means to be in touch with the suffering within ourselves as well as the suffering in our environment, our family, and society. Being in touch with the suffering helps us to understand and love ourselves and others better, and helps us to transform. Do you notice how when you get sick, you suddenly become more understanding and compassionate to people? When I was a kid, I would get sick and suddenly I became very talkative. I was a pretty quiet kid. But I would get sick and then my mom would come in and I would want to talk and talk and talk because there's some suffering. And that made me more understanding of suffering in others. And we want to communicate, we want to connect when we suffer. And that is a skillful means that I've seen in my life as a monk. If I suffer, that it can help me grow my compassion. I don't need to just wallow in my suffering. Sometimes we say, some brothers, and I've seen it in myself too, we can get addicted to our suffering. We talk about our suffering all the time, and if you take that suffering away, what will we talk about? So we have to be careful not to get addicted or grasp onto our suffering, but to learn to let it grow in a dynamic way. That's good Dharma friends always help us in that way. You say, I've heard you share about that suffering a lot. And you think, they don't have to say anything more, just that. It's like a mirror, and then you stop and you say, oh gosh, am I getting repetitive? Have I really done the work of trying to transform that suffering, bringing mindfulness to it? That's what happens to me. When my brothers reflect back, for example, once a year we have a shining light session. So the brothers are doing that now. And in that session we share our perceptions about our brothers or sisters. And it's quite revolutionary to sit there and receive the insight from your brothers. And with time in the Sangha, most of us get repetition year after year. The same points, not from same brothers. You might even go to a different monastery, but you hear, ooh, ouch, that one came back. I didn't transform that habit. And so I have a pile of shining light letters like this high now, 19 years as a monk. And every few years I will read through them all and I start to see patterns. And I think, ooh, gosh, I have to work more closely with that habit. So being in touch with our suffering allows it to grow and transform, for understanding and compassion to arise. And then it becomes softer and it can transform. But if we just keep with the habitual patterns of our mind throughout the day, we notice the same kind of thinking coming up over and over again. And one way I find helps is to see the signless nature of the suffering. We tend to label our pain, and labels will always be inadequate. And it might be a person, it might be a word, but that suffering keeps coming back with the same label, the same image. A person, a word, it could be an image. And I practice to look more deeply and see that sign is deceptive. It's not that person, or it's not the image of that person that I have inside of me that is the suffering. You need to penetrate more deeply. This is why blaming doesn't work, because you're actually just blaming the sign, the image you have of a person in your heart. And that image may have very little to do with the reality of the person you're blaming or judging. So looking to beyond the signs, and that allows this opening to happen. You no longer grasp onto your image of your suffering, but you look deeply into the roots of the suffering so you can transform it. So that's the meaning of deep, to be in touch with the wonders of life as well as the suffering. And then Hien. Means the present moment. And it also can mean what is happening in the present moment. Phap. Phap Lak Chu is dwelling happily in the present moment. But this character, Hien, when you put it together with this character, Phap, which means Dhamma, but in the sense it's phenomena. So the Hien in the present moment, the phenomena that you experience in the present moment, that's Hien Phap. So there is this present moment, and there is what is going on in the present moment. It can also mean to make our objectives become real. Or we can just say to realize. Objectives. So we might have an intellectual idea about understanding and compassion, but that's just an idea. So Hien means to realize it. It means you put it into practice. You cultivate compassion, and your actions, your speech are reflecting, they are full of compassion. So it's a difference between just talking about ideas and putting them into practice. So Hien is to make manifest. Thich says, ideas about understanding and compassion are not enough. They must be real in our lives, seen, touched, and felt. The real presence of understanding and compassion will alleviate suffering and give rise to joy. This transformation creates harmony between ourselves and nature, between our own joy and the joy of others. Once we get in touch with the source of understanding and compassion, our actions will naturally protect life and not cause harm. Thich often said there's a place for words and ideas. Otherwise, why would we be listening to a Dhamma talk? What's the use? So the point is to learn skillful use of words and ideas in order to help us to get to insight. And then we can let go of words and ideas because we experience happiness. So when I'm walking or doing something around the monastery and suddenly I feel some suffering coming up, I can remember the words of the song, breathing in, breathing out, and sing it to myself silently. And that helps me to calm down. And I know the breathing works. I have experience with it, but the words are there to remind me again to come back to my body, to be fresh as a flower, solid as a mountain, and so forth. And because that works inside of me, when I'm working with the children's program, and they are very noisy and maybe fighting or creating a lot of disturbance, usually I'll just go and just kneel down on the ground and just start breathing in, breathing out. And then maybe one child will start doing it with me, and then two, and then three, and then they start to grow. And by the time I get to the second verse, even the boys who are fighting and resisting the most, they cannot resist the power of the group. And so what happens in my mind is also happening in the actions of the children. And I didn't have to yell or scream or get irritated. So what works in our own mind also works outside. So we can make skillful use of words and ideas, songs. That is the insight. We could just say, well, nirvana is unconditioned. Why do we need to talk about anything? And yet we still suffer. So yes, nirvana is beyond concepts, words, and ideas. But how do we cultivate calm? How do we cultivate peace? That is what the Dhamma helps us to do. It's great if you can touch the unconditioned in every moment. You don't need the words. But you might be caught in an idea about the unconditioned. You might be caught in your idea of enlightenment. So Hien also means to put into practice what we learn, our ideas, words. And the fourth meaning is to adapt. To adapt to modern needs, as in like Hien Dai Hua. So we find skillful ways to adapt the Dhamma to the present moment, the situation in the world, to adapt. And so Thich created the Tipian order, and then almost more than 20 years later, he opened up the order to new ordinees. The first group was 6, we call it 6 cedars, like the cedar tree. And that included Sister Chan Kong. It included Nhat Mai, who we already talked about, who one of Thai's students who immolated herself in a Buddhist temple early one morning with the statue of Kuan Yin and the statue of the Virgin Mary to demonstrate her wish for reconciliation between the Catholics and the Buddhists. It's somehow, I feel like I can't say that without just taking a moment to realize what kind of motivation, what kind of immense pain and suffering must be happening in the society in Vietnam at that time with the war that would bring her to do that, to send that message to us, even today. Maybe we can listen to a sound of the bell. Our elder sister, Sister Chan Kong, tells the story about how that morning Nhat Mai came and she was dressed in the most beautiful clothes. I think it was the day before. Actually, it was the day before. She came dressed and they all thought, oh, are you getting married? You didn't tell us. And Nhat Mai said, no, but tomorrow morning come early to this temple. And Sister Chan Kong, first, I think she was detained by something. She could not get there early enough. And when she arrived already, Nhat Mai was no longer alive. So this is real. The order of interbeing. This practice is very real. We all inside of us. I know the first week we wrote about our vision for a renewed society, and I think all of us have touched in our lives moments where the pain was so great. And our wish for a world where there was understanding and compassion and love and conflict could end, competition could end, was so great that we could do anything even burn our own body in order to express our love. Yeah, I have to admit that it always makes me stop, and there's some part of it that I don't completely understand. I've always been so moved to hear Thai, like we read in the Vietnam Lotus in the Sea of Fire, describe the intentions of the monks and nuns and lay friends who could not find another way to express their voice besides burning their own body. But it's somehow, it's beyond words. Yeah, and many of us heard, I think earlier this year, that a man in the environmental movement went to Washington, D.C. and burned himself. And does anyone remember his name? Yeah, it's Bruce Wayne. Yeah, Bruce. Yeah, that's what I remember. His name was Bruce. So it's so essential that we learn to practice these teachings, because I I want all of us to be able to engage in the world and bring about transformation in ourselves and others. And we can do so much when we are alive. We can bring about so much understanding. There can be so much joy and compassion that we bring, whether we're a monk or a nun or a lay person practicing the Dhamma. We can do so much. So the first 6 leaders included Nhat Mai, Sister Shankong, and 4 other members. So 3 other men and 1 other woman. And the 3 women committed to celibacy. So Sister Shankong has been a nun only since 1989, but she's been practicing celibacy since she was I think her whole life, actually, but at least since they made the commitment to become members of the Tipian order. And then after those first 6, in the core of the Order of Interbeing, then Thai did not ordain new members until the 80s, when he ordained his niece, Hanh, who is now most senior lay Dhamma teacher. And we're very fortunate to have her in the US, in Virginia, Fairfax. She and her husband are both Dhamma teachers, and they run a practice center in Fairfax, Virginia. And then, together with the publication of this book in, I think, 1987, then the order began to grow here in the West. And originally it was only by invitation. And I think sometime in the late 90s, or the early thousands, people began to be able to request to become an order member. And now in the United States and many other countries, there's an Order of Interbeing organization which has training. And so, how many OI members are here? You know, there's Bego and the brothers, yeah. Yeah, so the monastics, we are trained in-house in the monastery. But many lay friends, and especially lately, many young lay friends, wake up OI members have been training young people to become members of the Order of Interbeing. So it's a great happiness. And I hope that we can continue to grow that capacity to train. But as Sister Shan Kong said many times, and Thai also, we don't need to wait to become officially a member of the Order of Interbeing. We can take these trainings to heart and start practicing them right away. So that's a little bit about the original name. And so when Thai came to the West, my understanding is that Thai, on a tour in the US, he asked for proposals for a translation of the term, and eventually came up with interbeing. Which is a term, which is a translation of a term in the Avatamsaka Sutra. It could be interpenetration. So all of this is included in that receiving, continuing, being in touch in the present moment to the present moment phenomena, realizing adaptation. And the first training of the Order of Interbeing, Thai said, contains all of the trainings. Aware of the suffering created by fanaticism and intolerance, we are determined not to be idolatrous about or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology, even Buddhist ones. We are committed to seeing the Buddhist teachings as guiding means that help us learn to look deeply and develop our understanding and compassion. They are not doctrines to fight, kill, or die for. We understand that fanaticism in its many forms is the result of perceiving things in a dualistic and discriminative manner. We will train ourselves to look at everything with openness and the insight of interbeing in order to transform dogmatism and violence in ourselves and in the world. So it's interesting to look at the OI trainings in the light of public health. And the title for this talk is Global Ethics. I think these are all interconnected. For many years, meditation has been taught in the West, and we missed this part. We wanted the deep meditation, the powers, the calm, the enlightenment, but without the ethics. And Thai has always said that the foundation of our meditation practice is our way of living. We have to have an ethical way of living. And at the basis of our wrong views is dogmatism, ideology, attachment, what we call attachment to views. Can I erase? In the 40 Tenets class, we talked a lot about upadaya or upadana, which is this kind of grasping. And it actually can also mean fuel, like a log that's burning. And the fire is, in this sense, it's grasping at the fuel, at the log. And so the Buddha often talked about our afflictions as being like fire. Our eyes on fire, our forms are on fire. The contact our eye makes with forms is on fire. And what he means is that is the location of our grasping, our attachment. And attachment to views happens at the level of our mind as a sense organ. So our mind attaches itself to our ideas and our thoughts, and it obsesses over them, like a flame burning the log, and we don't want to let go. We continue to feed the fire. So nirvana means extinguishing the fire, the ashes when they become cool. The flame, the heat has gone out. There's nothing that can stick anymore. There's nothing grasping, no flame. So attachment to views means in our mind, we grasp onto a certain idea of the world, and we make it our own little imaginary world. And we don't want to let go of it. And when people come along and they show us something different, we reject it. We say, it cannot be. So the foundation of the 14 mindfulness trainings is non-attachment to views, letting go of our attachment to how the world should be, even our vision for a renewed society. So we had that as an exercise to write down what is our vision for a renewed society. And yet we know deep in our heart to realize understanding and compassion at a collective level, we need to be able to let go of our own attachment to that vision of society. This is where the deeper training goes. It means we have to have incredible faith and trust in our own body and mind, that it's already enough. That the wisdom, the insight is already there for individual awakening, which is also collective awakening. So learning how to let go of our views so that the truth in its native form can manifest. That is the first mindfulness training of the order of Interbeing. We let go of all views in order to let the truth manifest, to reveal itself, Thich often said. And that's one of my favorite things that Thich said. We let go of all views, all concepts, in order to let the truth, to give the truth a chance to manifest, to reveal itself. Maybe we listen to a sound of the bell. I said, the 14 mindfulness trainings were born in a sea of fire in 1966 in Vietnam. The situation of the war was extremely hot, and we know how hot the fire of fanaticism can be. That is why the very first precept is about non-attachment to views, openness and tolerance, because we see that attachment to views, narrowness and fanaticism is the ground of so much suffering. Thich called the first mindfulness training like the great roar of the lion. To say that we let go of all ideas, ideology, even Buddhist ones. That is a great roar of the lion. You cannot argue with the roar of the lion. You cannot try to somehow rationalize or find some logical explanation for the roar. It just is in its native form. So, I said, when we read discourses of the Buddha, we often encounter the expression, the great roar of the lion, which is the truth loudly and clearly proclaimed by the Buddha himself or one of his great disciples. The first mindfulness training of the Order of Interbeing is one such roar of the lion, the compassionate voice of the Buddha admonishing us not to be caught in any ideology or system of thought whatsoever. So sometimes when you get near the monk or a nun or a practitioner, they say one thing and then a minute later they seem to say the opposite thing. And you think, what is with this monk? You said this, but now you say that. And that is they are practicing, not getting caught in one point of view or one ideology. That is a beautiful thing. So when we have like a bhikshu meeting, like today we had our meeting and we're discussing many topics, it's very interesting to see because when you go around, one person has a view, but then when you come around, they seem to have the opposite view. And somehow we have to come into some kind of harmony of views. And so we each practice letting go. And slowly we create a collective energy of understanding. And we realize what we call the Sangha I, which is more, has more focal power than any individual I. But in order to manifest that Sangha I, you need to let go of your attachment to views. Otherwise it doesn't work. We just stay in our own individual point of view. We cannot see the vision of the collective. And that is why I love living in this community, because I'm always astounded at the capacity of the Sangha I to have more precision in its view than any individual. The Buddha teaches us to look at things with the eyes of interbeing and to recognize their nature of dependent co-arising. That is, that all things arise in dependence on each other. Pratitya samuppada in Sanskrit. When we are able to see in this way, we free ourselves from a world in which each thing appears to have an individual identity. The mind that sees things in their interbeing, dependent, co-arising nature is called the mind of non-discriminative wisdom. This is what we call right view, the view that transcends all views. In Zen Buddhism, there is an expression describing this insight. The road of speech has been blocked. The path of the mind has been cut. the road of speech has been blocked. The path of the mind has been cut. It means you are speechless in the best of ways. You're no longer just carried away by your words. That kind of tape recorder in your head that just plays over and over the same stories. You're no longer caught in that. The path of the mind has been cut. Truth is found in life, and not merely in conceptual knowledge. We practice this by observing reality in ourselves and in the world at all times. Continually observing life means to practice mindfulness according to the method outlined in the Sutra on the Four Establishments of Mindfulness, Satipatthana Sutta, which teaches how to be aware of what is going on in our body, in our feelings, in our mind, and in the objects of mind, in the world around us. So I shared a little bit about that, I think a couple classes ago, about the Sutra on the Four Establishments of Mindfulness. And we'll go into it in more detail with when we study Pieces Every Step, which I think is next week. And so there's a story that Thich told over and over again from the Sutra of 100 Parables. In the sutra, the Buddha tells the story of a young merchant and his son. The merchant, a widower, loved his son dearly, but lost him due to his lack of wisdom. So this is what happened. One day, while the man was away, his little boy was kidnapped by a gang of bandits who razed the entire village before fleeing. When the young merchant returned home, he found the charred remains of a child near where his house had been. And in his suffering and confusion, he mistook the charred remains for his own son. He cried unceasingly, arranged a cremation ceremony, and then carried the bag of ashes with him day and night, tied around his neck. A few months later, his little boy was able to escape from the bandits and find his way home. At midnight, he knocked on the door of his father's rebuilt house. But the father, thinking that some mischievous boy was ridiculing him, refused to open the door. The boy knocked and knocked, but the merchant clung to his view that his boy was dead. And eventually his son had to go away. This father, who could not let go of his wrong perception, lost his son forever. I always wonder, why doesn't the sun come back in the morning? But anyway. But the story is there as an image to help us visualize what happens in our mind. Is to understand how, even when the truth is banging at the door, we refuse to see it. We cling to our view. When we go to corporations to teach mindfulness, and we share about the practice of letting go of our idea, I've experienced where, business people would just look at me like uncomprehending. Isn't it all to get your idea to be the one that everyone accepts? Isn't that the pathway to power, to prestige, to career advancement? And then you talk about letting go of your idea. So we're very lucky because we're monks and nuns, and it's very hard to kick us out of the monastery. So we get to really go deep in the practice. Well, we can also be really lazy if we're not careful. But I always take it as a good opportunity to go deep in my practice of letting go. We get the chance to let go of everything, even our most cherished views about ourselves. And it's so liberating because you get to do things you never imagined you'd do when you become a monk or a nun. You thought, well, I could do that, or I could do this. But then you find yourself in that situation, and there you are doing it. And you realize that the only limitation was your own mind, your own thinking. You're grasping onto your own view of reality. So I knew for myself that I'm raised and conditioned by society, by American society, and that if I'm in a workplace where I have a salary and I have a job description, it would be very difficult because I'm very responsible. So I would have a lot of difficulty to let go of my view. When I see I'm supposed to do it like that, and then I see somebody doing it in another way, I can see myself in another lifetime being very dogmatic and closed. And I see that because I know even as a monk, I can be dogmatic and closed sometimes. But luckily my brothers and sisters, because we are here for the long run, they are not afraid to let me know. And I can open up the blinders, and I can learn in those ways in which I still have some kind of closed grasping, closed view. And that is the beauty of the monastic path. You get a lot of feedback from everyone. Especially if you sit up here. But that's good, because if you're in for the deep run, then you're willing to do it. So please help me to see how I'm still attached to views. I'm always happy to learn new ways in which I'm attached to my own views. There's a story about a spiritual community that had a very difficult person come in. Nobody got along with them. They seemed to piss off everyone. And so when the teacher went away, then all the other students, they banished that person from the community. They sent them away. And the teacher came back and said, "Where is that student? What happened to them?" They said, "Oh, he's so annoying. Nobody got along with them. We asked them to leave." And so the teacher went and he got that student and he brought him back to the community. And they said, "Why? Why do you make him, he doesn't do anything that you tell him to do?" And he said, "Yeah, but he helps you to transform your suffering." He saw the benefit, right? When somebody doesn't do what we expect. So, so I don't know if in the morning if somebody puts a Buddha statue on their sitting cushion instead of showing up. I don't know if I say this, what will happen next sitting meditation tomorrow morning. Sometimes we have people who dance during the slow walking meditation. We've had all kinds of crazy things happen in our community. But you have to be really free from your view if you do that. Usually when people do things that we don't expect, it's because they're attached to their view. And so I always wonder in that story, I think it comes from Gurdjieff, but whether that person that was annoying everyone in the community, whether they were able to transform their own suffering. Of course, others could benefit, but I always wonder what happened after. Because probably they were also caught, very strongly caught in a view. Okay, so we've gone through the first mindfulness training of the Order of Interbeing. It is now 8:45. Yeah, there's so much here. So, yeah, I think I will need to spend a little bit more time in the next class to share about some other aspects of the 14 mindfulness trainings, because they impact on every aspect of the path. So I think we'll continue with this next Wednesday. So for now, I'd like us for this week to reflect on the question, in what ways are we still attached to our views? In what ways am I still attached to my views? And if you're very brave, you can post it on the Basecamp forum. But I want you to be really honest. So it's okay if you just keep it for yourself. It's just a reminder. But if you're very courageous and you're honest, you can share on Basecamp. You see, I even shared here. So you can also share how you still get attached to views. Those areas in your life where you still see there's rigidity, where you have trouble. Even, especially when you think it's the right view. Especially when you think it's the right view. Even if it's a Buddhist view. Reflect on it, write down, where do you still get attached, hooked? Okay, thank you. Just a reminder for those online and those who came up for the day or the night, the evening, that there's a form and there's a forum for this class. So you can, if you want to, you can enjoy reading the very nourishing and insightful insights or insightful writing and reflections of people who are taking the class. So if you go on the YouTube, I think there's a link there, and you click on it, and then actually didn't get a chance today to add the people who signed up this past week. But usually each week I kind of add people in. I think there's like 230 people now who are following the course online. I think some of us here as well are on there. It's very lovely to read what everyone's writing. And I also post the notes for each class up there, so you can. So this time I put the notes as well as a copy of the 14 mindfulness trainings. Next week we will start pieces every step. And if you have the time, please take a look at the transformation and healing, as well as breathe you are alive, because we'll start to go into the core of the foundation of Plum Village meditation practice, which is mindfulness of breathing and the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So if you have time, mainly read pieces every step, but if you have time, also look into those books.